Chase Thomas podcast. My nephew needs me to record. See, I already hate it. I hate it.
All right, hello, and welcome back to another episode of Pod Divided here on the Chase Thomas Podcast, where I'm still the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, Everything School HQ. Also here, down there in Decatur, Georgia, my good friend, fellow University of North Georgia alumni, Matt Green, is here. Matt, good evening, sir. How are you?
Good evening, sir. I am glad to be back. This is long overdue. We usually don't take Super Bowl Sunday, kind of threw us off there. But yeah, man, I'm definitely repping UNG, but I'm not a celebrity at UNG like you over here, man. Shaking hands with the president and whatnot on at mid court of basketball games. Chase Thomas, big time over here.
Hey, shout out to President Shannon, who invited me to go to the game and sat in the Champions Club with my family and my lovely wife, Sam, and got to spend the day doing North Georgia stuff, touring, doing that kind of thing, and talking about the future of UNG athletics, and got to see a fun overtime game. The men's team, unfortunately, not able to come through in OT, but it was a really fun experience. So excited about what's to come there, but it was a really good time. So very grateful that was an opportunity for me and my family. But yeah, no, we're always repping North Georgia on this podcast, Matt Green. It's Nighthawk always, no matter where we are in our pod dividedness with the Tennessee Volunteers and the Georgia Bulldogs. Our UNG connection will remain. And I've talked to people about it. Where
Exactly. We wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be here right now if not for
UNG.
UNG.
That's true. So once a Nighthawk, always a Nighthawk. And we'll see. We got to get Matt Green in there next. We just need to expand this connection, because you're local, man. You're over
Champions Club. I'd love to be part of that Champions Club.
It's a pretty cool time.
Up, UNG.
There you go.
It's a new basketball coach, though, right? I was pretty tight with the old basketball coach. Now that I'm blanking on his name, but I interviewed him a few times, a basketball preview and all that. But yeah, it's I think it's a new guy from back in the day.
I think he's been here 4 or 5 years, I want to say.
Okay.
So relatively new, but he's fiery, man. Like he was getting after the officials. He's fiery, man. He's an old school kind of college coach where he's emotional. Wearing the suit and tie. Most guys are wearing the quarter zips now. We're in the quarter zip sweatpant era of college coaching, and no, man, he was wearing the suit and tie on roaming the sidelines on Saturday last week.
Speaking of, that's like the pandemic was the best thing that's happened to men's basketball fashion, as far as I'm concerned. I don't get the suit. Like it doesn't make sense to be in a full suit. No disrespect, Dan Evans, that's the head basketball coach. No disrespect, Dan Evans out there. But I feel like just the comfortable, like those breathable athletic polos or 3/4 zips, like you're saying, with like some khakis and some basketball shoes, like some sort of athletic shoes. Like it makes sense. It makes a lot more sense than a suit and dress shoes being on a basketball court.
I think so. They look more comfortable. Obviously, it permeated into the workplace. I mean, as people get more casual there. Were you ever suit and tie? Did you ever have to do the suit and tie?
No, never had to go in the office of suit and tie. And even when I did go in the office, it was always like a casual dressy. But is there a football coach that's responsible for that? Because at some point, coaches, Tom Landry, all those, like they're wearing suits on the sideline back in the day. At some point they just weren't. Was there a time period that ended? Was that like the 80s or something?
No, I mean, it was before. I mean, it was later than that. I mean, Belichick, obviously, with the hoodie, and he even would chop off his long sleeve hoodie.
The suits have been gone for a while now.
How long? I guess I'd have to think about it. When the last time?
We'd have to look into that. Get our fashion expert,
because
on
they definitely went away before high or college suits went away. I mean, Will Hall at Southern Miss, I don't know if he's still doing that, but he was wearing a suit and tie a year ago, still roaming the sidelines. So that was one that took a little bit longer.
There's some outliers here and there.
Yeah.
But like, what's his name? Minnesota.
PJ Fleck.
Still rocking the tie.
But he does a quarter zip over it, I feel like, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
It's not the most formal tie, no.
No. But yeah, just dress for the occasion, and it feels more comfortable. Like you want to be comfortable in that regard.
Well, Division II basketball and men's fashion. Before we lose everybody that's listening, we should probably get into some college football talk, sir.
We're rusty, man. We haven't talked in 2 weeks. Like we've been away, man. It's been a busy time for both of us, but we're back and we're going to talk some college football here, even in the heart of the off season, the dead period here in February. So not even a lot of recruiting buzz really at the moment. Some coaches moving around all across the SEC. You got Nick Sheridan maybe being the new OC because Ryan Grubb goes to Seattle to be the new Seahawks OC, and then you have Liam Cohen leaving the Kentucky to go be the Bucks OC. You've got Georgia on both sides losing their top recruiter this offseason on both sides of the ball with Fran Brown on defense and Brian McClendon on offense. So wide receivers coach is something they'll be looking at. Tennessee losing Jerry Mack, the running backs coach, to the Jaguars for the same position. And then also Brian John Marie goes back home to Michigan to join his friend Sharon Moore's staff at So a lot of movement in the conference, even here in mid-February, and I was talking with Ryan Shumpert on the Tennessee Vols Sports Guy show earlier today about this, where I don't know what the numbers are on this, and I'd be curious to see them, but it feels like this cycle, and I wonder if you agree, Matt, that there's been way more college poaching this cycle for the NFL than in a really long time. Because when you think about it, Mike McDonald, Jesse Minter comes in from Michigan. So you bring in Harbaugh to the Chargers, Grubb to the Seahawks. Jerry Mack takes the running backs coach. Florida's had coaches picked off for the NFL. Liam Cohen gets picked off for the Bucks. Like I to not relitigate the whole thing, but like a lot of college coaches have been picked off late in the cycle because the NFL obviously hires after the college game. But I don't know. I feel like this was an especially vicious NFL hiring cycle for big time college programs. I don't know if you felt the same.
I'm not sure if I feel like there was anything different in terms of like the number of movements. I think the most different thing was seeing a guy like Jeff Hafley leave to be a coordinator, and seeing Chip Kelly flirt with NFL teams to be a coordinator and ended up taking another college coordinator job, just kind of shocking everybody, which Ohio State, that's probably what, if there's 32 NFL teams, Ohio State's like the 33rd, 34th team. Like, they're practically a pro roster. So it's there might be like Harbaugh. We see guys every few years. I guess when was the last college coach to just go straight to being a head coach? And like I know Kingsbury was fired and then hired by the Cardinals. Was he the last one that was straight from college to the NFL?
Let me think here.
And Harbaugh is Harbaugh close on the list? Like when he did it, leaving Stanford. Hey, there you go, Urban. So there's one, and he was a little different because he came out of retirement to go to the NFL. So I guess it has been a few years since we just had a successful head coach in college get that promotion, if you want to call it that just taking it up to the next level.
But it's also just a lot of coordinators and positional coaches moving up and stuff like that. Probably a lot of work-life balance upgrades and this, that, and the other. But I just think that's a lot.
Pretty standard, right? Like that's why that's going to happen. And like I saw someone framed it. I don't know if it's Adam Schefter. Like, oh, another college coach going to the pros with Brian McClendon. It's like that's a wide receiver coach taking a wide receiver coach passing game coordinator job in the NFL. Like that's pretty standard. That's not anything kind of, oh wow, a coordinator. Or actually, didn't somebody else like we didn't even talk about Georgia State.
Yeah.
Sean Elliott going to South Carolina, but I don't know that. I think the timing of it is what's just kind of thrown everything off this cycle. I think that's with Nick Saban after the playoff retiring. It felt like that started a lot of things in motion, and then just teams having to hire a guy immediately and say, "Hey, come play for this guy," and then at the whatever the expression is at the final hour. Grubbs bounces on Alabama and goes to the Seahawks. Like being a college coordinator to going to be a pro coordinator seems like a pretty standard upgrade. Like that's nothing out of the ordinary with that, especially if it kind of geographically makes sense. Staying in Seattle like Grubbs did. But I think the timing of everything and just so far after the fact that the carousel is not over yet. It feels so drawn out right now.
No, you're right. I mean, there's just movement all across the board. I mean, Georgia State had like paused spring practice. Like they just got it like the spring games off and everything. But Elliott has had a really interesting theory on this where it's like guys restarting the clock where Sean Elliott would have gotten fired probably with how much he lost in his roster and was picked apart from this cycle. And if Georgia State has a bad year, then it's going to be hard for him getting another job. Now he gets to go in the Shane Beamer, just kind of family and just kind of hide out for a little bit, depending on how long he's there and pick his next spot, right? Like he'll have another G5 opportunity next couple years, but it's also like family. There's always more to it where I think his family still lives in Columbia. So he's been going back and forth a lot. And I think his kids play high school in Columbia still. So it was a work-life balance and that sort of thing move. And everything's different. And Jeff Hafley, would he have survived another year at Boston College based on where it was heading? Or does he jump now smartly to get an NFL job and land on his feet versus getting fired and trying to get a job? And Chip Kelly, obviously, was he nearing the end? There was so much flirting with both sides of breaking apart. Did he finally just be like, hey, how much of it was just, they're going to fire me at some point, so I need to get out of here before I get fired? So I think that's a lot of it too. So I think every situation, especially on the head coach front, is a little bit different, but the calendar is just so messed up, and it's just a reminder this year, and that the NFL is behind the college calendar is making it that much worse this cycle too.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what we've talked about. Like, why are we pretending like these guys aren't in the same, industry, like that they don't just move throughout. But yeah, this off season has definitely shown us a lot of the flaws, as if we didn't already know what the flaws were. But I would say I speak for most college football fans. We have a college football podcast here, and we should be experts on the sport. But I think most college football fans did not know about the little 30-day window after a coach leaving until Nick Saban did it. I think that's when everyone was like, oh, so the portal just opens for their roster? And that's like, okay, now the portal's opening for Washington's roster. Now the portal's opening for Michigan's roster. It's like this. It's just kind of, what are we doing here? We need to just have a free agency period, a signing period, like, not just have this thing going on. It's, oh, well, you can poach their roster, but you can't poach their roster. It's just kind of all messed up. So hopefully,
well, I think the part of that though, that if you do that, because I've heard people talk about like shortening the transfer window to the first one to like 10 days, 7 days, whatever. I'm like, great, but you're still gonna have to have that 30-day window for guys when their coach leaves. So if you're gonna do it for players, I'm okay with it, but then you have to do for coaches, like put it in their contract or something where it's like, if you leave during this period or this, that, you have to leave now. And I don't know if NFL teams are going to sign up for that, obviously, because their season might not be over, this and the other. But like the Michigan Bama situation, I just don't know how you avoid that year over year, because you're going to have to open that up, and those schools are always going to get the short end of the stick, because they have 30 days to keep their roster, but it's also like you don't have the guys in the portal to go get, you know what I mean? Like, I just think no matter what in this new era, I think it's always going to be difficult that first year. I mean, Heupel, we saw here with like 30 guys out the door immediately, and you're just trying to, it's just hard. It just feels like no matter what, when you walk into a year one job for most places, it's just going to be kind of crappy, I think.
And as much as, we like to pretend everyone's playing the same game, when Jahmyr Gibbs gets poached from Georgia Tech and he's a star running back for Alabama, no one really feels sorry for Georgia Tech, But when Alabama can't even hold on to their star player, everyone's sitting back like, okay, whoa, what's going on with this sport? We need to figure out what to do.
Yeah, and look, it's one of those things where the athletes should be able to do whatever. It's just like college students. They should be able to move. If we're able to transfer every semester as college students, they should be able to transfer. Like, the parameters aren't in place, and if we're going to operate under this assumption, then like that's how it's got to be. And I just think it's just going to continue to be a lot going on. I don't see that changing anytime soon, because when somebody thinks they have the answer to kind of slow things down or make it a little bit easier for these coaches, especially, I think there's a counter always. When I read this and I listen to this, there's always a counter of like, well, if you do that, then this will happen. And if you do this, then this will happen. and just seems like there's not going to be this uniform solution to some of the issues that are currently within college football. But look, the ratings have never been better. Sports never been better. Interest for college football and the 12-team playoff and everything else has never been higher. And here we are on a year-round college football podcast, Matt Green talking ball. So we'll see how I think things will continue to be tinkered with over the next several months to years. And who knows, maybe Nick Saban's running things sooner rather than later and fixing stuff. And maybe things get a little bit less chaotic, especially for the coaching staff and hopefully for the players with more certainty and more understanding about how this all works and protecting them when their coach leaves, because it's not fair to the kids when their coach leaves late in the cycle and they're kind of left to figure things out on the fly. And that's got to be really hard. Do you trust the new guy and that you're going to hold your spot, or you're going to fit their scheme, or do you jump out? And I think it's just hard both ways. So I hope it gets fixed sooner rather than later, but we shall see, Matt Green. Dog bites. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Also, just remembered Chris Faulkner. That was the old UNG basketball coach. The name just came to me because I edited this video. When you said a lot, it like legit it registered in my mind. There's this video where he said it a certain way, and you know when you edit videos, like you just hear it 100 times when you're doing it. It just set it off for me. So yeah, I just remembered his name. He's I think still with UNG. He was the head coach for like 15 years.
Okay, good call, good pull.
But yeah. Another random UNG basketball. But yeah, dog bites. You ready for it?
I'm ready for dog bites, sir. Our weekly installment here on this program where Matt, the UGA expert, drops some dog bites for us. So what do you have for us this week, sir?
I got some dog bites for you this week. So last week we were talking about Georgia's pass catchers and what they've been the last 3 years, how they've really taken off in terms of production. Gotten much more consistent than in years past. Well, I don't know if you saw, there's a little kerfuffle, maybe that's the term, with a former UGA running back on social media, kind of regretful of his decision to go to the University of Georgia. Never really was the guy. Always had to sit behind other good running backs. So it got me thinking, what are we going to expect from Georgia's running back position in 2024? So you look at like what Georgia typically was when Kirby Smart first took over. Back in 2017, everyone knows about Nick Chubb and Tony Michel. 2 1,200-plus yard rushers that year. The next year with Swift and Holyfield, 2,000-yard rushers. You got to go back to 2019. DeAndre Swift rushed for over 1,200 yards. It's the last time Georgia had a 1,000-yard rusher. So they haven't really had that guy that you just feed the rock to, like they've typically had in the first years under Kirby Smart. You look at the running backs Georgia's put in the NFL since Kirby Smart arrived. Of the 4 guys, or of the, I should say, 6 that have been drafted, 4 of them are first or second round picks. So that's like big time, high level NFL prospects. And James Cook was the last one, but even he didn't have the college production. Zamir White was the leading rusher on that team. Kenny McIntosh was a 7th round pick after having a really productive year in 2022. But you look at 2023 with Dejon Edwards and Kendall Milton this past year, both roughly 800 yards, just under 6 yards a carry between the two of them. 2022, it was more of a 3-headed, but McIntosh was the lead guy. Kind of the same thing. A couple guys over 700 yards rushing. No one kind of averaging a lot, 5 yards a carry. 2021, same thing with Zamir White and James Cook. You're not seeing the level of production. Maybe it's because Georgia's become a better passing attack, but it's also not the yards per carry. Like Nick Chubb was averaging 6 yards a carry on more carries than any of these guys have gotten. Sonny Michel was up near 8 yards a carry. DeAndre Swift was over 6.5 yards a carry. You're seeing a lot of 5 yards a carry, and part of it, I think, is the not having elite talent at running back, and part of it, I think, is the offensive line hasn't been necessarily as elite in run blocking as you'd expect with some of these guys, how highly ranked they are coming out of high school. So I'm really curious to see 2019, or also going back to 2020 is the one year left out. Zamir White had just over 800 yards, and James Cook had 300 yards that year, and that's a 10-game season, so it's a little different. But you haven't seen elite rushing production from Georgia in a while, and DeAndre Swift in back in 2019 got almost double the carries of Brian Herrien, who's the second leading rusher that year. And so I think this is the first year since 2019 that you really look at Georgia's backfield and you think, okay, that one running back is much better than anyone else on the roster. So I'm curious to see if Trevor Etienne comes in and has maybe that DeAndre Swift kind of year where Georgia splits carries, but he's clearly getting the number one load.
Does it matter for Georgia if that's the case?
I think it matters in terms of there's not much proven like commodities in their backfield. Like you look at who it's going to be next year, like who's the number 2 guy on Georgia's, just off the top of your head? Like who would you say is the number 2 guy?
Branson Robinson.
See, probably Branson Robinson, I think, would be most people's answer, but I think he had a pretty bad injury, and you don't always know what a guy's going to be coming off an injury. Roderick Robinson was decent in a limited carries as a true freshman last year. Like I would probably put him up there with Branson Robinson, maybe Andrew Paul, and then you start talking about true freshmen that we haven't seen do anything. So Etienne's going to come in and be by far the most proven back on this roster, and I don't think and he hasn't necessarily carried the load either. You know, he's had Montrell Johnson. I don't know. I haven't had the stats right in front of me, but I feel like they were basically 50-50 splitting carries, at least more like a Holyfield Swift situation. So I don't really know what to expect from Georgia's running backs outside of Etienne. And obviously he's coming into a new offense. I think running back is probably the easiest position to transfer into translate in any offense. You get the ball and you make people miss. Like it seems more simple than other positions. But yeah, I think you're going to see Georgia with the first 1,000-yard rusher since DeAndre Swift in 2019.
I think that's a really good call, and I think that's very, very possible. I also just think it's going to be a two-headed monster, and I just think this Georgia team, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I just think they're going to be a pass-first team. Like Carson's going to air it out more. I think a lot of people are curious if he opens it up more downfield. Maybe that was more of a personnel thing that they weren't taking a lot of deep shots last year. I wonder if that's something that's added into the playbook for Bobo, for Carson this year, to just flex that muscle and flex that skill for NFL scouts this fall. But I think the thing that makes me more confident than anything that Etienne's going to go over 1,000 is teams, generally speaking, obviously, to run out the clock. Georgia's going to be up the majority of the games they're in this season, and I think Etienne's going to have a lot of opportunity to carve up yards in the third and fourth quarter when Georgia's crock-potting the majority of their schedule, and with a not limited, but a situation that you outlined where it's just not as much known depth and just comfortable depth. Etienne's going to get the ball a lot, and I think Etienne. I think a lot of Georgia fans maybe don't anticipate Etienne being the lead kind of superstar-ish back for Georgia because he was a two-headed monster in Florida and he wasn't the guy. But I think you're right in that my gut says he's going to be the lead back and have the opportunity to be kind of this big transfer home run kind of guy for Georgia this year. And I think he's going to be a big part for the Dogs. Is that weird for you, just cheering for? Is it going to be weird for you with Etienne with Florida the last couple of years to now be cheering for him?
It's funny you say that because I think there's a natural, like me and my brother were talking about this. There's just like a natural to hate on Florida players. You know, they're your rival, but he's like the one player, and I mean, there's probably a couple other players that like I never said a bad word about. I was like, yeah, you know, he's pretty tight. I don't hate on him. So it's kind of funny that, yeah, well, I didn't hate on him because he's actually good enough to play at Georgia. And these days, Florida doesn't have that many players, as crazy as it is to say, that actually could play at Georgia.
Yeah. Well,
like,
we'll see. I like that stat. I would go over for Etienne 1,000 yards. I would go over.
I think so, because the other point you made too, I think Georgia's going to be winning a lot of games. I think you've seen 2023 and 2022, the rushing stats look a lot better than that either of those teams really were at running the ball, because, and not to just disrespect Kendall Milton, but I feel like a lot of his production in 2022 and 2023 was that pounding it in the fourth quarter, and he gets 50, 60 more yards in the fourth quarter. And Georgia had like a top 30, top 25 rushing attack both of those years. Whereas I feel like when the game was truly on the line, like in the first half, Georgia was usually more 50-50 and having more success passing than running.
I don't disagree.
But I got one more. Go ahead. Thing for you. I wanted to rank the Georgia running backs like we did with the Georgia pass catchers. So, the top 5 is kind of easy. So I'm gonna go deep tracks. I'm gonna go the top 10 running backs of the 21st century. We're gonna just cut it off right there. Herschel Walker's the GOAT. Everyone knows that. Garrison Hurst, Roddy Hampton. They got some great ones back in the day. Terrell Davis. Starting in the 21st century, I'm going number 1, Todd Gurley. Nick Chubb, more yards, more productive, better Georgia career. I'm putting Nick Chubb 2. No Sean Marino, I'm going number 3. Sony Michel, number 4, and DeAndre Swift, number 5. What do you think about that top 5 right there?
Say it again. Say the last 3 again.
I got Gurley, Chubb, 1, 2, No Sean, Michel, and Swift, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Hold on. Wait, you just changed it. Say 1 through 5 again. What did you just do? Hold on. Do it one more time.
Gurley is 1.
Yeah.
Chubb is 2. No Sean Marino is 3.
Okay.
Sony Michel 4. DeAndre Swift 5.
I mean, it's clear Gurley 1. No Musa Smith love, as we talked about 2 weeks ago. I knew you weren't going to do it.
Love.
I knew you weren't going to do it. I don't know. You know what's interesting too? That's going to be hard for those guys is that like they obviously Chubb and Gurley had the connection, then Michel and Swift have the connection that you don't really know what it would have been like if they were just the guy by themselves, but they were just these 2-headed monsters at Georgia that you just got to enjoy both. I think Gurley got a little bit more individual plub, and so did Chubb than Michel and why am I blanking? Michel and
Chubb.
Wait, no, Michel and
Chubb and Michel were the ones that were together, and then Swift was like with Holyfield. And,
Swift, yes.
Or Swift was like the third with Chubb and Michel in 2017.
And I don't know, Swift was solid, but it never felt like he was an all-time Georgia running back. I think Kendall Milton's the biggest what if. I also think you know what? I would take Swift out and put Zamir White.
Oh, no chance.
I think I would put Zamir White there.
I'll get to my 6 through 10, but DeAndre Swift had like superstar ability. And it's like he was always maybe he's dinged up, like shared carries. Like it was always something kind of missing with his career at Georgia. But I feel like when you saw he was the only one that like was an elite talent like some of these other ones. But then 6 through 10, I go Kenny McIntosh 6, James Cook 7, Musa Smith 8, Thomas Brown 9, and Zamir White 10.
Zamir's too low. I think Zamir is being undervalued by you.
He just wasn't special like he was supposed to be. And after 2 ACL surgeries, was it 3? Was it at least 2 ACL injuries? Was it 3? I think he had 2 at Georgia. And like 1 was a senior in high school. I'm not sure, but I doubt he was as good as the prospect he was supposed to be before the injuries. He was still a good player, but I mean, you look at the 2 years where he was getting number 1 carries, he's averaging like 5 yards a carry, like 700-800 yards. Like he was fine. James Cook was dynamic. Like did everything. Like Kenny McIntosh in 2023, like his first few games, like all of his production was like receiving instead of rushing. So he got off to kind of a slow start, but Kenny McIntosh, I think, might be the most underrated running back Georgia's had in recent history. Cause he was just dynamic catching the ball and running it. And then Thomas Brown, just a solid guy for 4 years.
I always remember Thomas Brown and Noshawn doing the crank that Soldier Boy in the black uniforms against Auburn.
That's an all-time moment right there for Georgia fans. But yeah, and where is Thomas Brown now? I know he
He
after
was the OC for the
Carolina.
Panthers this past year. I think he might still be on staff. He's somewhere in the NFL now.
Yeah, he's moving up in the
He's in
NFL
the
coaching
McVay
game.
He is now at the Bears as their run and their pass game coordinator for the Bears.
Okay, so he's going to be the one to blame for Justin Fields next year.
He went to Tucker. Didn't realize that.
Oh, yeah.
37. I also think, this is going to be funny. How many yards do you think Musa Smith ran for his junior year at Georgia?
I would say like 1,250 or something like that.
1,324.
Oh, yeah, it was a big year.
260 carries, man. That junior year for Musa.
Rounder to
third
Baltimore.
round of the Ravens.
Third round, okay. Yeah, big time year. 2002 SEC champs. Big time year.
That man gobbled up the carries. Man, I saw Musa Smith live. My parents took me to Ole Miss, Georgia, in 2002. Eli Manning year.
Okay. Oh yeah, the Moose chants back in the day. That was good stuff. He was a fan favorite for sure.
There you go, Matt Green. I like these every week. Stock watch. Something else we're doing during this off season, sir. Buying or selling Wazzu stock in the post Pac-12 era, sir.
I mean, you have to sell it, right? I mean, it's without being in the Pac-12, like without playing USC and playing Oregon and playing Washington, like why are we going to care about Washington State? Honestly, like it sucks because I love having those college games on the West Coast. Like I swear any other day of the week, like NFL, I'm watching 1 o'clock games. I'm falling asleep by like 4:30, 5 o'clock at the start, like first quarter of those 4 o'clock games. I'm usually falling asleep for a little afternoon nap. Those Saturday night Pac-12 games, like I'm up till 1, 2 a.m. on Saturday night. Like I'm not missing those games. So I'm bummed. But I mean, if they're not going to be in that conference, I don't think I'm going to tune in the same way when Washington State's playing, San Jose State or something like that. It just doesn't. Colorado State. I don't know who they're going to end up playing moving forward.
I think I'm buying. And I think some programs, because they've pledged that they're going to still operate at a Power 5 budget for at least a little while. And their schedule is nice. I mean, it's going to be weird. I don't know if this is right, but they play Washington in the Apple Cup now in early September because of the Big Ten scheduling. So the Apple Cup, I don't think, is going to be the last week of the season. But hey, at least they're still playing.
Hey, at least we're getting it. I love it.
Texas Tech coming there this year, but you get Portland State, San Jose State, new coach right there at home. You go to Corvallis for the Pac-12 title game. And then you go to San Diego State. That'll be tough. At Boise, at Fresno,
do they
at
at least
New
play
Mexico.
Oregon State like the last game of the season?
They might, they won't
it?
because it's the 23rd. I have it. That one's already set for the 23rd of November.
Are we going to call that the Pac-12 championship?
They should do that. But I'm looking at all of this, Matt Green. I like their OC, young Arbuckle up there. He's a bright offensive mind. You have a good defensive-minded coach in Dickert. He has shown that he can do a lot with less. Cam Ward's been good the last couple of years. Here's what's going to happen for some of these schools that have moved on: Cal to the ACC, Washington to the Big Ten. Like, it's going to be an easy adjustment for some. Like, USC will be fine, I think, in the Big Ten, or like they're going to recruit just fine. Oregon's going to be just fine in the Big Ten. But Wazzu, there's going to be some at-large bids. Like, there's going to be teams that make the playoff that are not a part of this Power 2 era. Wazzu is in a great position when they merge with the Mountain West, if that's what ends up happening here, and we get the Pac-12 rebrand and all that as the Pac-12 with the Mountain West connection. Wazzu is going to be in a good spot to still make the playoff. Like, I think they're in a better spot than some of these programs that have joined the super conferences that don't have the super conference resources and aren't going to recruit at that level where it's ever going to be possible for them to make the playoff, right? Like, Illinois is going to always have a hard problem. And now you add 4 new programs that are better than you into this conference. Wazzu gets to hang out in a different kind of schedule. You still get to play a lot of fun regional games. Boise will be fun for them. I mean, Wyoming's close proximity, that'll be fun. I will like to see that. You talk about like not getting Pac-12 after dark. I think Wazzu will still be on late night games that are going to be really fun. Like I think Wazzu Boise will be cool. I think Wazzu Oregon State still will be cool. I don't know. I think I'm still buying stock, and I think it still sucks at Wazoo. It looks like they're getting left behind in this new era, but I think they're good. Like if you told me which of you had to rank most likely CFP appearances in the next 3 years of all the teams who just left the Pac-12, like I think Wazoo would be in that top 3 to 4 of all those schools. Like I think you look at it like Oregon, yeah. I mean, we'll see with Washington how it goes. Like the recruiting has not been great. We'll see how long Jed Fish is there, but they're in a super conference now. UCLA, I mean, good luck in this conference. Cal, good luck in the ACC. Stanford, good luck. I mean, Utah is now moving into the Big 12 with some big
Utah and
boys.
Arizona probably ahead of Washington State.
I think the schedule, though, is going to be nice for them every year. And they've shown that they can win a lot of games. They're a solid program. They're well coached. They have a fun offense. I don't know. I just think Wazoo making the CFP in the next 3 years would not be shocking to me at all.
That would not be shocking to you?
No.
So are you putting them ahead of Oregon State?
I think I am. I think I believe more. I don't like the Oregon State internal hire there with Bray. We'll see how that goes.
I would be buying Oregon State way ahead of Washington State. They just feel like a way more legit football program. Like I don't know.
Washington State's been really, really good over the last 30 years, Matt Green.
We've had Cam Ward for the last couple years, and this team still wasn't very good.
I mean, they were really good at the beginning. Didn't they fall off a cliff? I don't remember their schedule right away. I
think they were like a 6-win team this year.
They had a tough schedule, but I'm looking at, let's see, where are they at all time? They're actually, you know what's amazing? Their all-time record is 574, 574, and 45. Dead 500, sir.
So at least they got that going for them.
They're literally the definition.
They're the Chargers of the Pac-12.
They really are. But I mean, I don't know. You've had the Ryan Leafs, the Bledsoes over the years, obviously. You've had some big-time coaches come through there. I don't know. I just think they're going to be good. Mike Leach was 55 and 47 there. Jake Dickert is 14 and 9 to this point. Mike Price, obviously a legendary guy, 83 and 78 at Wazoo for 13 years. But I don't know. I'm buying some Wazoo stock. You don't have to join me, but I'm buying some Wazoo stock.
You're on your own on that one, I'm afraid, sir. Hey, I do have a fun fact for you here when we're talking Pac-12 conference realignment and whatnot. Did you know that the UCLA original mascot was the Grizzlies?
I did not know
that. The reason they changed it was because they were joining the Pac, whatever 8 it was at the time, or whatever it was called at that point. And Montana was already in the conference, couldn't have 2 Grizzlies in the conference. So they changed the Bruins. Fun fact for you.
Interesting. And that's the whole thing when people are talking about, like, how do you leave behind blank? I'm like, well, Montana was left behind at one point.
Yeah, everyone gets left behind at some point.
Tulane was an SEC school.
Yeah, Georgia Tech chose to leave the SEC. Bobby Dodd wasn't feeling it. It just means more. Bobby Dodd, Tech, they weren't ready for it.
I guess not, Matt Green.
I think it was like a legitimate, like, moral stance he was taking. Like the SEC it was cutthroat. They played dirty or something like that, or maybe it was something about the sportsmanship of, like, he legit like didn't want to play in the SEC. Something about morally. I don't know. You can look it up. Bobby Dodd, he made that decision. Probably cost Tech millions of dollars, maybe billions.
Well, we'll see. Maybe they find their way in the Super Conference. Who knows? With conference realignment, who knows? Maybe Georgia Tech finds their way into the SEC.
I think they're the reason that these ACC schools are trying to get out. It's the teams like Tech that aren't playing serious D1 football.
Wow, the Georgia fan really coming out tonight.
I'm sorry. It's what they run in the triple option. It's what happened, man. They're not serious.
I'm very pro triple option on this program, and I think more should run it, actually.
Yeah.
Vanderbilt, for instance, like,
let Heupel start running the triple option. See how much you like it.
No, I mean, we're running. Never mind. I'm not going down this rabbit hole with you. SEC 2023 schedule review series, Matt Green. Before we get into our SEC betting win totals that came out on BetOnline AG that we're going to discuss here with some early reactions to that. But final one here, Mississippi State When you look at their 2023 schedule and the results, did they win enough? Not enough? Or just the right amount based on what we thought coming into the year and what they were capable of?
Well, yeah. So you look at the schedule, and like 5-7 for Mississippi State seems about right, right? Like that's obviously below their expectations. I don't know what their preseason win total was. It could have been 6.5 or something. They could have underperformed, but it's like I'm not really sure how well they're supposed to do. I would just say they underachieved because they have like the SEC all-time leader in passing yards, and he had a terrible season because the coach decided to change up the entire philosophy. So from that perspective, like they definitely underperformed last year. But the Arizona win, like early in the season, like that was a good win. Like by the end of the year, like, but I mean, are you supposed to beat LSU and Bama and Auburn and A&M and Ole Miss? Like, I don't know. I don't know how many winnable games they really lost last year.
That's the thing, and it was a disaster, obviously, because Zach Arnett gone, and then that whole report coming out that the Rodgers family felt like they were lied to about like they were keeping the offense, and then it ended up not being kept, and then that just being a disaster, obviously, because the new office did not work, and like if it's not broke, don't fix it, and it should not have been changed based on what we saw this past year in Starkville. But like you said, like I think two things can be true. I think the season was a disaster. They had to make a quick change here to revitalize the program, and I think Levy was a solid hire for them, and I think he'll be a solid addition and get that offense humming back in Starkville next year. But I mean, I think you and I both had them near the bottom, but I had them as the worst team in the West. I went back and looked. I had them as the worst team last year. So I think it was always going to be hard to replace a legend like Mike Leach and to do that on the fly and all the different circumstances involved here. But I think some people talked themselves into the return of Will Rogers and what he had done to that point at Mississippi State, and that being enough to kind of hold the fort a little bit. Because we've talked on this program, it's always a good bet to put Mississippi State somewhere in the middle of the West because they're never the worst. Like they always win a couple we don't think they should, and they just kind of hang around in that 500 zone in the SEC West. But this past year, the bottom fell out, and the offense was just really bad, rotating a lot of different quarterbacks, and they were destroyed by injuries. But I don't know. I think Mississippi State ultimately were record-wise where they should have been, but it was also the way it looked and all the different variables involved that also came out and why they're resetting yet again in 2024.
Yeah, I mean, the most points they scored in an SEC game in the last, 5 games of the year was 13 against Auburn. Like, and they won one of those against Arkansas 7-3. But yeah, like you said, like they seem to always find a way to finish like 4th or 5th, win a few conference games. But the Arkansas, that was the only conference win a year ago. So I'm curious to see what Jeff Lebby does. It feels like they had a winning blueprint at Mississippi State. It's like we need to kind of be doing something different offensively, try to score some points. You saw Dan Mullen have success. You saw Mike Leach have some success. So if they can get back to doing that, then yeah, maybe they can start going to bowl games again.
And I think they will. I think Mississippi State's headed in the right direction once again, and I think they'll be just fine in the next couple of years, sir.
50 to A&M. Was that after the Jimbo firing? Was that the first game? I want to say.
I have to go back and look.
But yeah, A&M was a train wreck on offense all year.
No, A&M wasn't a train wreck on offense. They were cooking with Connor Wegman healthy early in the year. Connor was cooking.
A&M was definitely underperforming offensively.
I don't think that's true. They were dialing up against Miami with Wegman before he went down.
Would you say the Petrino Jimbo Fisher thing was a success?
No, but it's a huge what if. We don't know what Connor Wegman would have done for a full healthy season.
They were 101st in the country in points per game. Oh wait, no, I'm looking at 2022. They were 25th in the country in points per game.
Hold on. What I'm saying though, they opened with a win 52-10 against New Mexico. Scored 52 points there, and then 33 when Wegman got hurt.
No, they were definitely worse once Wegman got hurt. But I mean, there was a lot of subpar offensive performances. The 50 spot was the outlier against Mississippi State for sure.
Yeah, that was.
But no, the offense wasn't that bad. 25th in the country. 33 points a game. Now we've seen much worse.
Yeah, I'm not going to do that. You're not going to do it. No, not on this podcast, Matt Green. A&M has some issues, but offense is not one of them, especially talent. SEC betting win totals, though. They are out here on BetOnline AG this week, Matt Green, and I thought this was a really interesting early look ahead to what Vegas and the insiders see when it comes to how the SEC is going to look now with the Super Conference, with Texas and Oklahoma coming into the fold. But my first question to you, when you look at all 16 teams here represented with their betting win totals here in the future props, which total for you is the most shocking when you look at this, Matt Green?
Well, for one, I was like, ooh, Georgia, 10.5, huh? We haven't seen Georgia at 10.5 in a few years. But I think the one that hadn't really hit me yet is Missouri, sitting at 9.5. That just seeing Missouri ahead of Tennessee, ahead of Oklahoma, like, I don't know if I'm ready for that. Like, I know what they got coming back. Like, they were a pretty good team last year. But I'm not ready to just pencil them in for 10 wins again. And like 9 at the worst. Like, I don't know. Is Missouri at 9 wins being a like disappointing year level at this point?
I wonder with the fans too. Like, what are the fans' expectations here? Because obviously you have a breakthrough year. Look, no offense to Columbia and the fans, but it's a sleepy place to play more often than not. I don't think it's like of the most passionate fan bases in the SEC. I don't think they're ever going to rank near the top. But I do wonder where their heads are at, because obviously they had a lot of early success when they came into the SEC, winning the East multiple times right out of the gate here. But they obviously slid a little bit after that, and they've struggled to find their footing. And now the East is away. They don't play Tennessee this year. So unfortunately, Tennessee will not get revenge at home in Neyland this particular season. But I wonder, if you're a Mizzou fan, have you pivoted where you're like, oh, look at where Drinkwitz is? Like, we hire well. We got Kirby Moore in here. We just lost our DC, but we paid, and we're going to be okay. Because like losing Baker might be a huge deal for Mizzou, to lose a big time DC to LSU like that. We'll see if the defense is just as good as what they were a year ago. But Kirby Moore, Kellen's brother, was a huge addition to that offense last year, and he's back. So you're able to retain him for yet another year in Columbia. Brady Cook back for what feels like his 7th college football season. Luther Burden back, obviously, is a big deal for them. But I think, to me, and I mean, I don't even know if I mentioned that huge endowment or donation they got like this past month. So that huge investment into the athletics program, biggest ever. Do you remember that, Matt Green? Like Mizzou got that
right?
huge, that they got a gigantic, it was like 62 million or something donation. So they Mizzou is,
They're trying to play big boy ball.
they are, and that's the whole thing, is what you're saying, where it's like, it's just kind of weird to see Mizzou up there with the big dogs and Vegas, and people just expecting them to run this back next year. And I'm very curious if that's the expectation, or fans are still like, hey, like, we're fine if we're 8-4. We're still, hey, we understand that the SEC's loaded, and like, Texas and Oklahoma are coming in, like, it's gonna get harder. And look, we had a great year last year, but maybe that's only something that happens every 3 to 4. Or they're like, hey, we broke through. We're part of the big dogs now. We're one of the 5 best programs in the SEC. This, that, and the other. I'm very curious where the fans' heads are at with Mizzou.
Well, and I think the schedule definitely plays a role in this number being as high as it is. It's funny because, we kind of talked about the East and West through the years, that like, I'd love to see Auburn in the East and see, how much success they could have playing in a weaker division, or, maybe Kentucky at times, like they're not as good as their record looks. You put them over in the West and they're not going to be good. There's been a lot of, maybe disrespecting Georgia for, they wouldn't be in the SEC championships as many times if they had to go through the West. So you're seeing Missouri now, the schedule we anticipated getting more difficult because, instead of being in the weaker SEC East, now they're going to play everybody, but now they don't have to play Georgia next year, and they go at Alabama. But if there's ever a year you could pick to go at Alabama, I mean, it's 2024. Like they could be a top 10 team, top 5 team next year, but this is the most uncertainty they've had in 20 years, basically. And then they go at A&M, like another team that's like super talented and will be a difficult road game. But if those are the 2 toughest road games you got all season, those are beatable opponents. Like those aren't teams that we necessarily anticipate being like top 5, top 10 teams next year.
If you're a fan, these are those schedules that I would just be so annoyed because they don't play a real game until October 5th. October 5th, Matt Green. Like they're opening with Murray State, Buffalo, Boston College, Vandy, and then a bye before they go to A&M.
Boston College is a little, at least you're playing like a Power 5 team, like a major conference team, it's like something you can get excited about. Like the Buffalo and Murray State games, you're playing backups. But you can at least be excited, especially you got to get revenge after Boston College won a couple years ago.
That's true. This feels like a 9-3 schedule to me. I would hit the under right now. We're not doing our over-unders yet, but this looks like 9-3 to me.
Yeah, I don't know. I could see this team winning 10 games because, I mean, just thinking about what they were a year ago, like Luther Burden has got that potential to be like this is a loaded wide receiver class this past year. Like seeing this NFL draft stuff coming out, like there's 5-6 guys up there at the top that are all elite. Like Luther Burden could be the best receiver in college football in 2024. And Brady Cook, we saw how good he was at times last year too. So Missouri, I wouldn't sleep on them, but you're right. It's something about betting on Missouri to win 10 games that I don't feel great about that bet either.
No, but it's a good schedule nonetheless. I think you feel good if you're a Mizzou fan.
Who
it's also
stands
like
out to you? Oh, go ahead.
If they win 10, are they in the playoff? I think they're in the playoff, right?
I guess it depends on the 10 they win. Does it? Like, because if A&M, Alabama, and Oklahoma, I think are their big 3 games. Like, if you lose 2 of those 3, you don't have many key wins. Like, it might depend. Because because you're looking at them. Like last year, do they get in? Or does like Ole Miss and Penn State get in last year? They were like 11-12, but when you start talking automatic qualifiers and the at large, I'm not sure if they do get in with those. I think those 10-2 teams, you got to have a good win or 2 on the schedule.
I like it. Matt Green, next. Which is the best buy now bet for you? So for all Matt Green's friends listening right here, who is your recommendation on the best? Like this might move a little bit. This is the one to jump on right now, like either the over or the under on these win totals. Who is it for you?
I'm going to leave out Georgia because I really don't see a scenario of Georgia losing more than 1 game. I know the schedule is really tough next year, but I think Georgia is going to be really good next year. But leaving out Georgia, oh man, this is tough. Like the Oklahoma 7.5 feels really low. Like I know they're coming to the SEC, and I don't know what to expect from them. That one feels low. A&M at 8.5 also feels high, like with year 1 under Mike Elko. So those are probably 2 that stand out to me. But yeah, there's some tough numbers in here.
I think the OU jumped out to me. Like 7.5 seems low based on especially the expectations of fans. I think fans that's a huge L if you're 7-5 in year 3, right? We're year 3 now, correct? With Venables? Or is this year 2?
No, this is year 3.
That's what I thought.
This will be year 3.
That's a big year for him. And I don't know, like you made a lot of progress in year 2, calm some nerves. Dylan Gabriel off to Oregon. But Jackson Arnold, we'll see what he looks like as the guy. Was kind of spotty in the bowl game, but I think that's not a big deal. You lose Jeff Levy, your OC, to Mississippi State. Now you got 2 co-OCs there in staff that you promoted. So there shouldn't be a drop-off there. I think DeMarco Murray is their running backs coach, if I remember correctly. But they have talent. They've recruited really well under Venables, top 10 just about every year. And that hasn't fallen off. But I think 7, like, I would be very surprised if they're a 7-5 team. I like that one as like a buy now because I think the 7-5 8.5 is weirdly low for Oklahoma, because I think Jackson Darnold has a lot of talent. I think the offense should be good. They've recruited really well. I think they're going to be okay in the SEC. I wouldn't worry about that yet. And when you look at the schedule,
I might take my answer back now looking at this schedule, sir. They were 10-3 last year. They definitely saw a huge improvement from year 1 to year 2 in Venables, but you got Tennessee, you got at Auburn, you got Texas, you got at Ole Miss, you got at Missouri, you got Alabama, you got at LSU. Like, I don't know, man. That's a brutal schedule they're getting in the first year in the SEC. Like, I think there was like a market correction, just going from the Big 12 to the SEC, that maybe you take a win or two away from that. But they've got to have one of the toughest schedules in the entire conference next year.
Well, I think what's worse is you get, like, they have a bye, thankfully, in between Mizzou and Bama, but Bama and LSU to close the year is, that's their last 2 games.
Yeah, it's brutal for sure. Like with what Ole Miss and Missouri are expecting to be next year, and Auburn is like the ultimate wild card in the entire SEC. I think they kind of are every year. But Tennessee kind of feels like the same type of wild card, except for they don't have the same floor that Auburn has. Like, Tennessee actually could be a college football playoff team next year. And, Josh Heupel coming to Norman, like that game's just going to have massive implications. Like, it's going to be tough for them to not have like 3 or 4 losses before they get to November.
I mean, maybe. I think that's very fair. I mean, it's a tougher schedule, but like people worry about, it's like they beat Texas last year. I think they have more talent than Ole Miss. They have more talent than South Carolina, and they get them at home.
Do they?
Yeah.
Do they have more talent than Ole Miss?
Yeah, I think so.
I don't know.
Ole Miss is top end talent. Ole Miss is good. Don't get me wrong. I like Ole Miss, but I think as a whole, if I had to do a whole composite of the talent on both teams, I would say Oklahoma has more talent than Ole Miss.
I guess I skipped Ole Miss when I was writing these teams down. Where was Ole Miss?
They're also at 9.5.
They're at 9.5. See, that feels about right. Like, they feel like I don't know which way to go with them, honestly.
Well, is that your answer for hardest to get a feel for here? Is Ole Miss at 9.5 the hardest one?
Ooh, I think so, because they feel like a team that could easily go 10-2. Shoot, they could go 11-1. Like, they have some serious like ceiling potential next year. But I'm not going to be surprised at all if this team goes 9-3, 8-4, because it's Ole Miss. Like, it's not. I mean, I guess I got to look through the schedule. Like, it's not a gauntlet. You got at LSU, at Florida. Is that going to be a tough game? Do we even know? And obviously they got Georgia, they got Oklahoma on the schedule. It's not the most difficult schedule in the SEC, but obviously you potentially have the number 1 team in the country potentially in November. So it's not easy, and you still got to go to Death Valley. So Ole Miss, I'm starting to drink the Kool-Aid more than I ever have. I've been hating on Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss being fraudulent the last couple years. But I mean, as far as top end talent, like this seems like everything coming together. Alabama, for one, being weaker, but also not being on their schedule, like that's going to do wonders. But yeah, I think Ole Miss, I'm still hesitant to go over the 9.5 though.
You just are waiting. Like, what's going to happen is Ole Miss is going to be like 9-3, 10-2 for years under Lane Kiffin, and you're like, I don't know. You're like Tony Romo when it comes to Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin. You're just it doesn't matter what Ole Miss does year in, year out with under Lane Kiffin. You're just gonna be like, I don't know, Jim. Like, I don't know, Chase. It's just there's something about Ole Miss I just can't completely buy in. Matt, they were in the playoff 2 straight years. I don't know. There's just something that doesn't feel sustainable about Ole Miss. I don't know. You're just never going to you're always going to dip your toe into Ole Miss. You're never jumping in the deep end with Kiffin.
No, see, that's not even true. I wasn't even dipping my toe in. I was confident that they were overrated, that, Matt Corral's numbers were inflated versus inferior competition early in the season. I was definitely not I think the 10-3, 8-5, 11-2 the last 3 years, I would have said they're not as good as their record is indicated over the last 3 seasons, right? With 2023 being by far, I think the best team of this last 3 seasons. But if they do it, I'm starting to put a toe in. This is the first time I'm really giving them a chance. So I'm starting to be like, okay, Lane Kiffin might be the guy. So if they let me down this year, then yeah, I might jump off permanently.
Oh wow. Why though? What's it falling off? Like if they go 9-3, are you like fraudulent? Like what is it going to take for them?
Well, I mean, think about if they go 9-3 though. Like who are their good wins? Like if they go 9-3 and lose to LSU, Oklahoma, and Georgia, then it's like, okay, well, you beat Kentucky and South Carolina. Cool. Your quarterback put up some big numbers versus MTSU and Furman. That's fine. And you won some games and you finished ranked 21st. Like, that's fine. Like, I don't know. I think their schedule is a little easier this year. And with how much talent they've gotten in the portal, this kind of does feel like the year for Ole Miss that they kind of need to win something substantial this year. Alabama and Nick Saban aren't in the way anymore.
No, but we'll see. I think Ole Miss. Look, I'm buying a lot of Ole Miss stock this year, so I think they'll be all right. But I do think one of Mizzou and Ole Miss has to fall off. Like those 9.5 for LSU, Ole Miss, and Mizzou. Someone has to underachieve kind of big of those 3.
Oh yeah. Of those 3, I think the one most likely. Man, those are all 3 tough numbers for me. Because I think you just want to naturally say LSU, but like they lost the Heisman Trophy winning quarterback, and that defense was awful. Like I don't expect their defense to be awful every year, but things are kind of lining up for Ole Miss and Missouri. It feels like better than they are for LSU going into 2024. LSU's just kind of got a certain level they always operate at because they get better talent consistently than those 2 schools.
That's fair. Tennessee, does the 8.5 feel right to you, Matt Green?
Yeah, I think 9.5 would definitely be too high. Because Tennessee, 8 wins definitely seems like a possibility. They feel like a 9-3 team. If I had to pick going into next year, I think they have a lot of things going for them, but I think the schedule is still going to be tough to win more than 9 games. But I mean, I would be surprised. I would say I would be surprised if they went under. If they won 8 games, I would be surprised. What about you?
Well, I mean, I think we'll know if they're a playoff team after Bama because they have the bye the week after Bama in between Kentucky and Bama. They have 3 straight home games there with Bama, Kentucky, Mizzou, or Mississippi State before they go to Georgia, and they finish with UTEP and Vandy. Like, I think what's imperative is they can't drop the neutral site in game 2 to NC State. Like, I think UT Chattanooga might be a Thursday night. It says Saturday for right now, but I think there's a possibility that moves to Thursday. So you might get a week in a couple days to prepare for that. At Oklahoma, obviously, is going to be a big game, but I don't think that's a must win if you want to make the playoff. Like, I think.
Wait, what's getting moved to Thursday?
The UT Chattanooga game.
Oh, okay.
It's on a Saturday because they've done the Thursday night opener 2 of the last 3 years. They didn't do it last year, but I would not be surprised from what I've heard that they might move that.
Big time programs don't play on Thursday night.
It's better for fans all around because you get to get it out of the way. The
college football is played on Saturdays, sir.
Tell that to Maction and everything else. No, college football is whenever it wants to play.
No, I do miss the days of South Carolina being in like a quality SEC game on Thursday nights. They seem the Steve Spurrier era. They seem to really embrace that.
I feel like I have a lot of Rutgers.
But it feels like a tier below. It feels like Thursday college football is like it's a tier below.
I feel like I remember Louisville and Rutgers having a lot of big Thursday night, Big East games.
Yeah, Louisville's big time Thursday night team. Like Louisville, Virginia Tech feels like a Thursday night game.
Big East used to own that. I don't think at Arkansas will be a big deal. Like you can drop the Oklahoma game and still have the playoff right in front of you. I think Florida, you'll be favored at home. That will be good. I think the playoff comes down to Bama at home. Like if you beat Bama at home again, Tennessee's a playoff team. If you drop that one, I think they're 9-3 and they miss. the playoff. So this is a really, really nice schedule. It's very even for Tennessee. It's not like you have this back-to-back just slugfest like some of these other schools have. I think you get to a little bit of a break in between Georgia and Bama. Obviously, you get a break in between Oklahoma and Bama. I don't know. I think it's going to be hard to beat Florida and Bama back-to-back. Like, I don't know if that's ever happened where they've played them back-to-back. I feel like that's a no. Those are going to be
I
two
would say no way, because
Yeah.
Florida on October 12th just looks so weird.
But at home, I think they'll be fine against Florida. But you have to beat Florida at home, and those are always going to go down to the wire, and it's always going to be weird with Tennessee, Florida. But a lot of it also just comes down to Nico. Like, if Nico's a Heisman finalist and plays like one, then Tennessee should be able to get to 10-2, even with year one. I mean, he's not a true freshman. He sat behind Joe all year. He's got all the talent in the world. He's got the most probable. He's definitely got the most upside of any quarterback in the country. He was number one overall 2 years ago in recruiting rankings for a reason. I just, we'll have to see it. Like, if he could stay healthy, we're going to see with the wide receivers. You could bring back basically the whole offensive line. That's all huge. But yeah, I think this is a schedule I would hit over right now. I would be very surprised if this is an 8-4 team based on where Tennessee got to, because Tennessee, if you remember, they got to 8-4 with a very, very difficult season this year, and then finishing 9-4. I think with the up and down nature of last year, and for Heupel to still get 8 wins out of where they were with injuries and just multiple situations as to why they kind of regressed in a multitude of ways, they still were 8-4, and Heupel still won a lot of games with this group last year in one of the more frustrating seasons. I think that, to me, just screams there's going to be improvement there. So I would be very surprised if they're not a 9+ win team. So I think 9-3 should be considered the floor for fans. And I think 10-2 should be the goal. And that's a playoff team.
Yeah, and I like how this schedule, like you're saying, how it progresses. Like with NC State early on, it's like I was saying with Missouri, Boston College, it's like, I think NC State, or they might be ranked, right? They're showing a ranked number next to them. Looking at them right now,
I think they'll be preseason top 25.
So I mean, it's a quality matchup at Oklahoma. Like, that's going to be a big time SEC. Is that their first game in the SEC?
I believe so.
It's one of them, if not the first. So you're having 2 SEC road games before you even get to Florida and Alabama. So and like we said about Alabama, like, we don't really know what to expect from Alabama in 2024. So the one thing, and obviously you go at Georgia next year. The one thing that I'm curious to see, like, it didn't matter. I mean, it mattered in terms of, like, dollars and cents in the BCS era, but it didn't really matter. Like, there'd be years where, let's say a year like, what was it, 2012, Georgia lost. Georgia and Florida both went or had one loss, right? And Georgia went to the SEC championship, lost the SEC championship for their second loss of the season. And then at that point, Florida is ranked higher, and Florida goes to the Sugar Bowl. I think they played Louisville that year. And so the team that had a worse season is the one that got to go to the better bowl game. And when it was the BCS year and it was about what bowl game you go to, like, that's fine. But if Tennessee is sitting at like a 10-2 and they have to play Georgia or something a second in time and lose and go 10-3, I really want to see how the committee deals with that. And those teams that lose the conference championship games versus the teams that didn't even play in them, because I don't want us to be penalizing those teams too heavily when they have one extra loss because they were better than that team. Like, so I'm curious to see what the committee does with something like that, because I think Tennessee is a team that's could look at a 10-2 type season and potentially have a rematch with Georgia.
That, I don't know. We'll see. But that's a possibility. It's going to get weird. I guarantee you the end of this college football season is going to be a mess in terms of who gets in and like at large stuff. I think it's going to be a mess. But we'll see how it all plays out. I think the story here, Matt Green, though, and we'll end here. Texas and Georgia. Texas, let me emphasize, Texas and Georgia at 10.5 apiece atop the SEC. They're on equal footing in Vegas's eyes. Does that feel right to you coming into 2024, Matt Green?
I would say a lot of it's about the schedule. I think Georgia's got one of the tougher schedules in the SEC. Other than the fact they don't have to play Georgia, that makes their schedule a little bit easier. But they kind of, I think, kind of split hairs is the fact that Georgia's playing at Texas. So if you're talking win probability, you might be giving Texas the nod there if you're Vegas because they are at home. But we know Georgia's got to go at Texas, at Texas, at Alabama. It has Clemson in the opener. Ole Miss they'll play. That's on the road too, right? At Ole Miss. So I mean that's on the road with 3 preseason top 10 teams. So and then another one away from home in a neutral site. So I think a lot of it's about Georgia's schedule, and they seem more prone to being a 2-loss team than we've seen. They haven't been a 2-loss team since 2020. And I think that's the only year they've lost 2 regular season games in the last like 7-8 years. So I think Georgia still, I think, is going to be ranked higher by pretty much everybody in the preseason. But I think you're going to see Texas in that like preseason 2, 3, 4 spot. So I think the schedule plays a big factor in it, but I think Texas is, hitting the SEC at the right time.
Well, I also think it's kind of funny that they're built so similar. Like, you look at how both programs are built right now. Quinn Ewers and Carson Beck, the 2 best pro-style quarterbacks going into next year. I mean, they might go 1-2 in the draft going into 2025. CJ Baxter, Trevor Etienne, 2 big lead backs. I think both will get some Heisman look depending on how their seasons go, but I think they're both going to get a bunch of opportunity behind 2 great teams, and they'll be in a lot of situations where they're going to have an opportunity to feast. A lot of depth from transfers at the receiver spot. So Isaiah Bond moving over to Texas, and then you also get Silas Bolden from Oregon State, who's going to occupy that other spot. So 2 of the 3 wide receivers for Texas will be transfers starters. And then obviously, Matthew Golden too from Houston, transfer. So all 3 of Texas's receivers will be transfers actually, because they lose a lot with Worthy and company and Whittington and all those guys. So they're having to replace a lot of production, but Texas is just, the defense proved that they were legit last year. They obviously just made the Final Four right there till the end. Big comeback against Washington. Almost pulled it off there. And you look at it, I think they are pretty evenly matched on paper. It's just kind of funny when you are like, I'm looking at different forecasts for the roster and what both look like. I think they both look like the 2 best teams in the SEC. And I think those are like Bama. You had your run. Bama is not the cream of the crop in the conference anymore with Texas coming in here. I think the 2 juggernauts for the foreseeable future, until proven otherwise, is Texas and Georgia. And I think they're right now the 2 teams to beat going into 2024. And look, Sarkisian getting a bump this week in salary and everything else. And you see how Texas has done in the recruiting trail. And you have Arch sitting right behind Quinn, where he's going to get 2 years, it looks like, to sit and get ready to take over. Same kind of thing at Georgia, where they have 5-star, 4-star quarterbacks who are willing to sit and wait for a couple years for their opportunity, like Carson Beck just did. Gunnar Stockton figures to do the same thing. I don't know. I just think it's interesting that they're built in a very, very similar fashion. And I think those right now, 10.5 for both, feels right to me.
Yeah, that is kind of interesting. Like I was looking at preseason Heisman odds the other day, or someone had just quarterback rankings the other day, and I was kind of shocked at how few proven quarterbacks we have in college football next year. Like it feels like Quinn Ewers and Carson Beck are 2 guys that would be in that top 5 conversation like most years. But right now they feel like they're head and shoulders above, I would say, every other quarterback in college football going into 2024. But one game I think we're sleeping on, as crazy as it sounds, Texas goes at Michigan next year. And I think Michigan's not going to be as good, but I mean, that's on the road against the reigning national champions. So that's not going to affect their ability to play for the SEC championship, obviously. But that's another big time game on this schedule.
Where do you lean? Who do you think is better right now? Who is the safer 10.5 over of the 2?
I think the safer one is probably Georgia,
Okay.
because if they lose at Texas, like, I think there's a chance that that's the best team they play all season, and then they run the table. Texas, obviously, we just said they have at Michigan. Oh, they lost Oklahoma a year ago, and obviously Georgia's coming to them. I don't know. I guess it's just with Georgia, you go back to 2017. What is that? 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. 7 seasons. Georgia's had more than one loss one time in the last 7 seasons in the regular season. So if you're banking on a team to go 11-1 in the regular season, Georgia is usually a good bet to do that. Texas, have they arrived at that team that we can expect to be there every single year? I think we're going to find out in 2024. I don't know if I'm ready to bet on them every single year.
I think I'm there. I mean, I think a lot of it will be how long Sark's there, if he's there and he's able to keep building. But I don't know. I'm pretty optimistic about what Texas has building.
Also, the last thing I didn't even mention, Texas at Texas A&M, the final game of the season.
Yeah.
Like, you don't think that energy, that atmosphere is going to be absolutely bonkers? Like, these teams have not played since 2011. Like, it's one of the biggest rivalries in college football that's just been brewing. We had West Virginia, Pittsburgh. We saw what that was after the layover. Like, that place is going to be insane. And you see a lot of teams by the end of year one, they start to gel and, kind of come together, kind of like those one and done freshmen in college basketball. By the tournament, they're basically sophomores at that point. So by the end of year one of Mike Elko, this team could be coming together, and at Texas A&M is definitely going to be a hostile environment.
I don't disagree. Well, we shall see, Matt Green. We shall see. But that's all I've got right now. That's fun. That was a fun exercise, and we'll get into some other betting totals and over-unders and that in this offseason. But this will be fun for this week's show. But thank you as always, my friend, and I will talk to you next week.
Yes, sir.